Just saw RC, all the guys coming to talk football, but let's get going, Cindy, and have them get up with Paolo Banchero, who hopes to turn Orlando into the Magic Kingdom, dominating the NBA. We'll talk about him, the top pick in the draft. And if Kyrie angles to get a new deal in Brooklyn, why he's given the Nets a list of teams that he could trade him to, and what that means for Irving and KD. And look, when the Jets rookie Garrett Wilson learned what dinner would cost him, he almost lost his lunch. Why Ryan Clark is to blame for that. That and a lot more as we talk today. And we start with the top of the draft, the NBA draft, that is. The Magic, in a bit of a surprise, took Paolo Banchero #1. He was the 14th player to go first overall in the modern draft era, breaking a tie with Kentucky for the most over that span. And then there was Chet Holmgren, who was the #1 overall recruit in 2021. He went #2 overall to the Thunder, now the highest drafted player to come from Gonzaga in the modern draft era. And the Rockets selected Auburn's Jabari Smith Jr. at #3. Houston hasn't drafted an eventual All-Star since Yao Ming in 2002, the longest active drought for any franchise. So this is the fourth time in the modern draft era that the top three players were 6'10" or taller, and the first time since 2001, also the first time freshmen went 1, 2, 3 since 2017. Fultz, Ball, as in Lonzo, and Jason Tatum were the top three picks. But there was an even bigger story. It was this man, Kyrie Irving, created a list of teams that he'd like the Nets to consider working with on a sign and trade if he and the team can't agree to terms for him to stay. Woj joined us in the last hour, and he had this to say about that.
This is a really murky scenario right now between Kyrie Irving, the Nets, and Kevin Durant. He has a $36 million player option he can opt into midweek next week, or he could opt out, become a free agent. And right now it's a situation in the marketplace where there's no cap space out there for Kyrie Irving to leverage the Nets. The only thing they can legally negotiate right now is an extension off of that $36 million number. It's looking less likely that at the very least you're going to see Kyrie Irving on any kind of long-term deal.
So here's the list that everybody's talking about. Both LA teams are on his list, as well as the crosstown Knicks. That would be interesting. The Heat, the Mavericks, and the 76ers. Now, none of those teams have cap space to sign him without Brooklyn's help, and sources said some of them aren't interested in acquiring him in the first place. So let's bring back in Perk and RC and Brian Windhorst joining us now. And Windy, set the scene for what looms over Kyrie and the Nets over the next 5 days. Oh, we're having some problems with Wendy's sound, but we're going to...
More money.
Oh, there he goes. Go ahead, Wendy. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, sorry. The big thing with Kyrie is the decision to opt in or not. Obviously, if he opts in, it's vastly more money. And the problem with opting in is that it really reduces the options that he can go to any of those teams. For example, the Lakers would love to have him for the $6 million mid-level exception. But when he goes to opt in and now he has a $36 million salary, it pretty much eliminates them from trading for him because there's no trade package that they can offer Brooklyn that they would accept. Same situation for the Los Angeles Clippers. So really this comes back to, no matter how long the list is, it comes back to whether Kyrie is willing to actually opt out of that contract and sacrifice the guarantee to give himself more options. I know that this seems like it would be more simple because Kyrie would be able to work out potentially where he would want to go, but teams can't really know whether they want Kyrie or can afford Kyrie or not until he makes that first decision. And once he makes a first decision, it potentially changes his leverage. So this is a completely unusual scenario, and it would be complicated even if it was a star player with no problems. Considering everything around him, it's very hard for any of these teams to truly get in this bidding war when they don't know which path he's going to take.
The Nets are truly in a mess. So, Perk, I look at this And I wonder, what do you make of what's happening now with Kyrie?
Well, I think Wendy hit on it, right? He used the word unusual. And that's what I think about when it comes down to Kyrie Irving. Unusual, right? Every time it's a big moment in the basketball world, we look at the NBA draft last night, and we're talking about Kyrie Irving. We looked at when the NBA went down to the bubble. We was talking about Kyrie Irving. Some type of way he's going to make it about him. Now, I say that to say this. Listen, Kyrie Irving is a special talent. We understand he has a little some problems. When people go right, he tends to go left. You can't trust him if you're an organization. But one thing that you can trust is when he get between those lines that he's going to perform at a high level. And so when I look at this situation in particular, I don't see the Brooklyn Nets and Kyrie Irving fixing or coming to a solution except for him leaving at this point. They don't trust him. I think at this point in time, he really don't want to be there, and he's showing us those signs. If a person show you who they are, you have to believe.
Do you think he's more likely to go than stay then?
I mean, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. RC, so if that happens, you look at this list, and I know you've been following the Kyrie story closely, so I wanted to bring you in on this.
Absolutely.
You look at this list, which team is the best fit?
You know, first off, I want to add something to what Perk said about Kyrie. And when you talk about Kyrie really making things about himself and us talking about him at the draft in different situations when Kyrie Irving isn't playing, it is because he'll go left when others go right, but it's also because he's just a dang good basketball player. He's one of the best in the world at what he does, and that's why we speak of him. So when you look at a team like the Miami Heat, and don't get me wrong, I love Kyle Lowry, Matt Strus, I love Tyler Hero, Gabe Vincent, Victor Oladipo, all of those guys, but think about the way Jimmy Butler had to exhaust himself in some of those wins in the playoffs just to get them to the conference finals and lose to Boston. When you have a guy like Kyrie that can take some of that scoring load, someone who is a walking bucket as soon as he steps between the lines, that's someone that you're willing to give up some of those players for and figure out a way to team him with Jimmy Butler. And now a team that has just been on the cusp for 2 of the last 3 years, to me, would have an opportunity to win it all with that type of talent on the team, with a leader and an attitude setter and tone setter like Jimmy Butler.
Now, what a team that would be with him. Go ahead.
RC, you do realize when we talk about the Miami Heat, we're talking about one of the best coaches in basketball. We're talking about the ultimate godfather in Pat Riley, who don't give a damn. We're talking about one of the ultimate leaders in Eric Spoelstra, who don't care about calling players out because he has the OG to have his back in Udonis Haslem. I don't see that working. I don't understand how Kyrie Irving could even want to go to South Beach knowing
what's the Godfather
that they
move?
wouldn't deal with his shenanigans.
What's the Godfather move? The Godfather move is not to trade for Kyrie Irving. The Godfather move is to let the Kyrie Irving situation blow up and then wait for Kevin Durant to say he wants out of there.
Yeah,
that's the Miami Heat move. Wow. And that's some of the teams on this list are like, I don't want anything to do with Kyrie Irving. I want what comes after that. Now, Kevin Durant has a new podcast on his Boardroom Network that is out this morning where Kevin Durant speaks about this situation for the first time, as far as I can tell. He doesn't say much. He says that Kyrie Irving and he are in contact, but that he's going to stay out of it and stay back and not get involved because this is his situation. He certainly had the opportunity to voice a strong opinion. He did not. But that's what you got to understand, Ryan. When the teams that are on this list are looking at it and evaluating Kyrie, they're not just evaluating what's going to happen there. They're evaluating what the next move could potentially be.
I agree, but isn't that the problem? Isn't that the problem when it comes down to KD? I believe, KD is a special talent. We understand one of the best basketball players, if not the best in the world. But when it comes down to holding his teammates and his quote-unquote brothers accountable, he does a poor job at that. He holds the media and people on the Twitter app more accountable than he do the players in his locker room. What do you mean he's going to stay out of that? Like, we're talking about a guy that you plan with Kyrie Irving to come down to Brooklyn and play together.
Are you saying part of his job is to keep Kyrie there to make sure that works? To make sure.
I mean, part of his job is to be honest with his brother. Part of his job is to hold his brother accountable. He's had his back.
he doesn't have the leverage to demand it right now. There's nowhere else in the marketplace he could go and get it. His best chance to make the most money on the best contract in a place that he chose to play is Philadelphia. And so I think there's going to be a common ground there on something shorter than the full max, but still a very significant commitment from the Sixers to keep James Harden.
Okay, and then in that line of thinking, Zach, when you talk about James Harden in Philly, can he be that all-NBA player that he used to be, or are those days over?
I think the days of first team All-NBA are over, but if he has a serious summer of conditioning and getting healthy, the pick and roll combination between him and Embiid was the single best pick and roll combination in the NBA after the trade. If he's healthy and locked in on his conditioning, I do think there's a scenario where he can get back into that third team All-NBA, solid all-star, upper tier all-star conversation. Not first team. I think those days are over, but I'm not quite ready to shut the door on this guy as one of the 15 or 20 best players in the NBA. Philly certainly has to hope that's the case, because if that door is shut, their path to contending for a title around Embiid in the next 2 years gets a lot murkier.
Okay, an optimist over there. So do you think they can actually be a contender with Harden and this team as currently constructed?
I think right now with Harden, Maxey, Embiid, Tobias Harris, I love the Melton trade. I still think they're a little bit short.